Season 3 of Squid Game was so bad, bro. What was that at all, man? How could they mess this up so bad? It was terrible. This was shit. It was shit. It was just the first one. First season was excellent. I remember everyone was raging on and on about that. The plot was tight. The characters were great. It was interesting. It had its funny moments. It was so bleak, but you could see the comedic funny moments in between. It was interesting to watch, and it said something interesting not just about society, which is basically every South Korean film or drama critiques society in some way. No, it said something about gambling and this debt-based economy that we're in. The the way that regular people are wrecked. You could see outside of the Squid Game how people lived. You could see the mom of the main character, Gi-hoon, and speaking of him, he was an interesting character because he was kind of a naive guy on the brink of death. He was in debt to loan sharks. He was getting beaten up. He was constantly in trouble for that, and you could really not know what was going to happen to this guy. And at the same time, he had this insane positivity about him in dire situations. And the way he reacted to things was so interesting. It was fascinating to look at him, and the way he would always find solutions to absolutely any problem and kind of get away with it. His plot armor was kind of humorous in a way. It was a little bit ironic how he would survive basically every interaction that he was in. Fast forward to season 2, and I thought that was also pretty bad. People say that it's okay, that it still retained the same quality. I beg to differ. I think season 2 kind of sucked as well. I No joke, I fell asleep halfway through this season. Season 2 several times, bro. I could not get through that. It was not a fun experience at all. It was really bleak. The camera angles were weird. The characters were kind of copycats of the first season. They weren't that original. And the main character now was this dude who got rich, and but he was this guy who was essentially a shell of his former self. There was nothing of the same protagonist anymore. He was always going around being mopey, sad, and I think this actor in particular, he's not good at this type of role. I don't think he was good as being constantly mopey and sad about what had happened before and the consequences of the games and the trauma that he's. It's just not fun to watch this guy in this state. And that's what Squid Game is. People tune in to watch the entertainment of it. They want the dopamine of seeing these people. We've had survival games in reality, like reality shows. We've had these, and that's what people like to see, right? They like people going through obstacles, but here you have the added thing where it's a survival situation. That's what they like to see. That's why they're watching this. They do it just because it's stimulating, it gets their dopamine going. That's the whole point of this. If you're just moping around and you're not having too many of these games, it gets kind of boring because even the drama in season 2 wasn't that great. The chemistry between the characters was not great. It wasn't that interesting or well developed. There were too many plots. Now you get into season 3 and there's like this baby subplot. What is up with this baby, man? What is this shit? Because this guy Gi-hoon at the end, okay, that ending was, he basically sacrifices himself for what? For what? Okay, God forbid that you have a semi happy ending or an ending nowadays where the villains get their comeuppance. Why? I mean, South Korea has done this before. They usually, their villains do get some payoff because that's the idea of karma, at least, or the efforts of the protagonist are going to result in some blowback to the villains, at least. You had Snowpiercer, another great movie like this. I haven't seen the series, but it's the same thing. They blow up the train, and the villains. I'm not gonna spoil too much, but the villains do suffer some damage along with the protagonist. So you could have had something like this, but no, you have the villains, the antagonists. They're all essentially just going off into the sunset, and they're super. There's no consequences for them whatsoever. Even worse than this, Okay, even more depressing is that they show that the Squid Games are all around the world and they're in the US and they're a global phenomenon and nobody can stop them. Maybe that's the case in real life, bro. I don't know. Maybe that's realistic. Maybe that is what happens. But you don't watch this sort of thing for realism. Okay, if this thing was realistic, this guy Gi-hoon would have died in the very first episode. Or at least in the first 3 to 4 episodes, this guy would be dead. So he would not survive any of the things that he survived. So if you're telling me that this is a realistic series because it ends badly, it's not. This is not. No part of this has ever been realistic. People have never watched this for the realism of it. It's just ridiculous what they do with these characters, and makes no sense at all. The what was the entire thing with the cops investigating the villains, investigating the Squid Games? That leads nowhere. None of this leads anywhere. The protagonist doesn't see his daughter ever again. So pointless, man. What a pointless series. Completely pointless sequel altogether. And didn't the director say something about the fact that he didn't want to make this anymore? Like, he didn't want to make this series anymore, but he was essentially forced to do it by Netflix. And this is something that these studios always do. They have a popular product that people like. The director doesn't want to mess it up because it's their work of art. They don't want to go in there anymore and do it again and redo it. And they just tell them, if you don't do this, someone's going to do it instead of you and they're going to get the paycheck that you deserve, bro. And that's what happens. So instead of doing that, they just go in, they make something that they don't want, and they mess it up on purpose. Same thing with the Matrix. You had the Matrix 4, that was the worst thing because the director didn't want to be bothered with this anymore. And here it seems to be the same thing. The protagonist gets killed off because the director wants to make sure that there's never gonna be anything like this again being produced. But I think it will, because it looks like there's going to be an American version. And we all know how well American adaptations or spin offs of Korean or Japanese media do, right? They're always so good. I love them. I love the American, like The Ring and all of these other ones. They're so good, right? The remakes, we love remakes. Uh, Speaking of which, there's this woman in the US. She's the basically the recruiter, and just it just looks ridiculous. She's beating up these guys in an alleyway. It's just so, it makes no sense, and I think they really dropped the ball on the writing since season 2, and especially season 3, because you just cannot have an ending like that. It's not just bleak. Not only does it depress you, but it's completely pointless in terms of the narrative that you were trying to set up and the characters that you have essentially developed, and it leads to worse consequences for every character, essentially, what Gi-hoon does. And it's the same thing with basically most of fiction. Season 2 was so boring. There was nothing happening there at all. There's barely anything to like about it at all at the same time. You see the characters, they're making like this barricade and they're trying to defeat the guards, and it's just the way they're going about it makes no sense. They have no bullets, they're completely under equipped. There's the whole forced drama with the voting. They can't get enough votes to end the game. That's a huge part of it. Why? Why? It's not an interesting thing. And also, it was if it was realistic, a lot of people would, to be honest, probably be super scared. They'd probably have adrenaline pumping through their veins. The whole question is, would people prefer to lose their lives than to be in debt? I think most people would probably prefer to live than to be in debt. I mean, like, they would prefer their debt over losing their lives completely. So you see this several times in season 2. They vote like 100 times, man, and they can't get enough votes to end the game. I think at least one of those votes would have ended the game in real life, because a lot of people would probably be scared. There would be more people that are scared and cowardly than the degenerate gamblers that want to continue. So that also did not make sense. It kind of ruined the tension for me as well. The scenarios were not interesting. The games weren't interesting. There's a game where they're all tied up their legs and they're trying to run. They're running a marathon. Essentially, they're falling over each other. It looks silly. It's supposed to have tension, but it didn't seem to have tension for me. The way that the episodes were split as well, you could really tell there wasn't much story at all because it always ends on a cliffhanger. And they did one of the worst things for season two, which was end it on a cliffhanger. And then they did a good thing, which is to release the next season almost entirely at the same time, right after it. But then the next worst thing was that this season sucked even more. I would not watch this. I want my time back. I want my money back, my time back. I wish I had not watched this at all at the same time. No point watching this whatsoever unless you want to be not just depressed but also enraged at what the characters are doing and their decisions and their decision making. The payoff sucks completely. In a show like this, I think you need to have at least some type of not necessarily a happy ending, but an ending that's conclusive. But it seems like they just want to milk this even more. And at the same time, there's the protagonist who is not gonna be there anymore. He's That was the only interesting part, and that protagonist, in my opinion, died with season one. After that, just scrap everything after that. Season two and three, they're not canon. Okay, they don't exist. This sucked. Don't watch it. And but thanks for watching my video though, and that was my take on this terrible, terrible show. See you on the next one.